Yeah, seriously, whenever I'm not feeling well, I actually take the tea that Joe has. What is that? The throat, whatever it is.
Throat coat, baby.
Tea.
Yeah, throat coat, and I make hot toddies.
It gives me my sweet radio voice.
You can't say hot toddies on YouTube, Geoff.
Yeah, you can because it's an alcoholic drink.
I mean, Geoff
I can say fuzzy navel.
All right, fair enough. All right, are we ready?
I'm ready.
You're listening to Discography Discussion, episode 240, Cynic, hosted by Dan Terry.
Hey, Dan, what's up? And I'm like, hey. And you're like, so I can't do the episode tonight. And I was like, oh, and you're like, before you get mad.
Geoff Kane.
Let's get ready to rumble.
That's what your air conditioner said to the deer.
Oh, fuck yeah, it did. It was fucking crazy.
And Joseph Wren. I was on board for that idea because it just sounds so ridiculous to me. Presented by DiscussMetal.com. And if you drink coffee while power washing the blood off the dance floor, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe. That is Dan. That is Geoff.
Joe's being rather prophetic with the opening there, because that's pretty much what I'll be doing tomorrow morning.
Well, it's not going to be, unless the side of your house is a dance floor.
It was for the fucking deer.
I mean, fair enough. All right, let's get off the deer. I'm getting a little cynical of that story.
Wah, wah.
That's right. I made a bad joke. I just woke up, so you guys get the just woke up me.
Hey,
guys, we're finally talking about Cynic.
Dan, why don't we circle back and try that again?
Circle back? You want to talk about Circle Back? How Terminus came out like this day, like 2 years ago, and
it's the second anniversary of Terminus.
Holy shit! Is that today? I was just saying that because of your beanie.
You should come over and listen to the Circle Back, the Gift of Time, on a 7-inch. Yeah.
Okay. Or you can just bring it over to my house.
No, that's all right.
You might forget it, and that's okay.
Getting
with
me to leave the house is really hard.
We noticed. That's why Joe and I are in the studio, and Dan is remote yet again.
That's right.
I'm in the
letting
studio.
People in the studio again. I'm making coffee. Mics for days. Everybody is ready to roll, except Dan, who decided to go to bed for an hour.
Yep.
And it looks like he's feeling better because of it.
Yeah.
Props to you for taking care of yourself for a change.
Yeah, sounds good.
You know, don't ever expect it again. I'm really excited. I'm really excited to be talking about Cynic tonight because everybody has been literally knocking down my door since the first Death episode. Yo, where's the Cynic episode? And I always kind of didn't know what to do with it because Cynic at the time, I mean, I don't know. They had a decent discography, I guess. You know, I don't know. It was just one of those things where I was like, I don't feel like there's enough Cynic for us to talk about. Because back then, every band we talked about had like 7 or 8 albums out. And I was like, I know we could probably go 2 hours just on Focus. Don't worry, we're not going to, Geoff. But we're going to try. We're going to try our best to do Cynic as well as we can in a timely fashion.
So what is the gimmick of this band?
Cynic is just a death metal band that came out of Florida in the late 80s. Not all that different than any other band, except for the fact that they were very different than other death metal bands. As a matter of fact, these guys are so progressive at times that I'm actually kind of surprised that they even have any extreme elements at all. I think that's the most disjointed thing about Cynic is that like they're way more prog than they are death metal, but they still throw the death metal vocals in there.
Yeah, because they have a keyboard player that they hire to do it.
That could do death screams.
Yes.
And then their main singer,
Paul.
I honestly still can't explain to you exactly why he sings through a vocoder.
Oh, he trashed his voice.
Was that what it was?
Yeah, that's why he didn't do any of the growls or anything like that. He trashed his voice and sang through a vocoder the rest of the time because he was just didn't sound right, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, from my understanding, that's the reason why. He just blew out his voice, and that's why he did everything through a vocoder.
Here, Dan was hoping that his major vocal influence was Soundwave.
Well, shit, who cares?
I grew up listening to Soundwave as a kid and, you know, wanted to sound like that.
I did. That was the there was 2 Decepticons that my parents never got me that it killed me as a kid, and that was one of them. And the other is Starscream.
I mean, Starscream's great if you like black metal.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, those are the 2 metalheads that are Decepticons, and those are the 2 I didn't get. And that's why I do this now. Sorry, Dan.
It's all right. I mean, I would do the entire podcast with a vocoder if Joe would let me. But
maybe one day for your birthday, I'll let you do an episode with nothing but vocoder.
Yeah, and I've got an app on my computer. I can switch over to vocoder anytime I want. But I'm not going to do that to you guys tonight, but I'll just do it on an episode where you guys think it's safe, and then I'll just bust out the vocoder.
Well, before Dan decides to focus on his opinions, I'm going to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, then you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. So if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening. And now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
Well, we do enjoy our 5-star reviews here on Discography Discussion, and we read them on the show if you leave them for us, so leave us a review wherever you're allowed to. I know you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Keep wanting to say iTunes, but that would show how old I am. And you can also leave us reviews, I believe, on Podcast Addict. That's what I've been listening to all my podcasts on lately, and it's really cool for an Android platform. You can leave reviews, you can subscribe, you can do all that good stuff just through the app. And no, they did not pay me to say that. I just like it a lot. And yeah, we'll read them on the show. We read one on the show just the other day, and you guys loved it. Actually, I think it's for an episode that hasn't come out yet, but if you're a Patreon subscriber, you've already seen it.
Live, in person, over the internet. That's right. One thing that we've started doing for all of our Discography Discussion patrons, we are broadcasting our live recording of each episode. So you can join us and join in the conversation by leaving comments on the video while we talk. I cannot wait for that episode to happen where the King of Metal drops some serious knowledge and we have to interrupt ourselves to make sure we get it right the first time.
It's going to be like, I'm going to have to stop you guys right there. Joe's completely wrong about this.
So we will never finish an episode. Is that what I'm hearing?
Never.
I love you, Joe, but...
It just goes on and on. 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 All right. Cynic.
Oh.
Actually, before we get into Cynic, see, this is what's fun about you guys seeing what our process is.
You want to try that again,
You
Skippy?
actually can see live how much work Joe actually has to do. But before we get into talking about Cynic, I've got some feedback from some previous episodes to read you guys. You guys ready for this?
Yes.
We got an email from Fabio. He says, "Greetings from Toronto, Canada. Listen to the Iron Maiden episode on the way to work as I somehow missed it. Stupid Apple app. Should have gone Podcast Addict. Gotta say, I can't believe no mention of the drumming. Nico McBrain has to be the worst musician in a high-profile band with stellar musicians, unless you count the dude who stands there and claps in Depeche Mode, but don't think that's your jam. Well, it's Geoff's jam.
Oh, dude. Seriously, Depeche Mode is like on my Mount Rushmore.
Once they added a third guitar, they buried his pedestrian drumming even lower. Thankfully, live, you can barely hear him in the mix. I was able to hear from the soundboard. Friend was hearing impaired, so he gets the feed headsets at venues in Canada. Cool. Well, that's kind of cool.
Hell yes.
There's hope for me if I ever go deaf. And his drumming is terrible. Not to mention he was playing the same fills over and over, no matter the song. Aside from the politics of how he supposedly screwed Clive Burr out of the gig, his drumming sounds like boxes falling down a staircase. When he's put up in the mix, it sounds like shoes in the dryer. There are tons of YouTube videos comparing different songs with isolated drumming where they match exactly. He is literally playing the same parts most of the time terribly. His Talking Jericho interview was hilarious as he openly admits how bad he is and how he is amazed that he hasn't been fired. He's not the only one, LOL. Love the show and keep the episodes coming. Night Shift crew here are all fans and are asking for a Misfits or Danzig episode. I told them not to hold their breaths as those would be tough listen-throughs. I mean, anything's possible.
I vote for Misfits on that one. We did talk about Sam Hain, so I don't think we're going to get Dan to talk about Danzig in its entirety.
Mother, tell your children not to... Okay.
To be fair, there's a reason we didn't talk about it on the episode, right?
I just didn't even notice it. Like, if I'm being honest, like...
It's
I didn't
par for
notice
the
that it
course
was-
heavy metal drumming, right?
I mean, it kind of was. I mean, you got to understand, I spent a lot of years listening to Lars Ulrich.
Oh, shit.
So there's not like... I guess I just don't hear it. A lot of the times I'm not paying attention to the drums unless I'm listening to like some sort of like super techie band with like tons of time signature changes and things like that. And I guess Nico fooled me. So, which is what all metal musicians, I guess, need to do, right?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty fortunate that, my like early influences of metal drumming came from people like Sean Reinert, so who we will be talking about tonight.
Don't you feel special, Geoff?
Yes, we
To a
do.
certain extent, I do. Yeah, I feel very special because I'm here and Dan's not. It's always the other way around.
We got some comments on episode 238. Nevermore. Dan, you want to read these off of YouTube?
Nevermore. We got Jetta PA says, good to hear Geoff again.
I agree.
Shout out to Geoff.
Yay.
And Nick Bolafino Music says, thanks for doing this episode. Nevermore is legendary.
We are definitely believers in that now. We mentioned it more than once on the episode. Nevermore kind of slipped by, and that was a bit of a travesty, if you ask me.
Well, that's just
agree.
you guys. I've been talking about Jeff Loomis since pretty much day one on here.
Geoff, get out of my house.
Hey, it's somebody in metal and his name is Jeff. Of course, I'm going to pay attention to it, even if he spells it wrong. I'm still watching it and listening to it.
Over on Patreon, in reference to The Fragile Art of Existence by Control Denied, Randy E commented, FYI, the reissue does have Chuck on vocals on some of the demos. I need to get that reissue, and I need to listen to the greatness of Chuck Schuldiner singing some sweet old school heavy metal.
I think our patrons would approve that purchase, so go ahead and make it 3.
Yes.
Okay, make it 3. All right, sounds good. Lance Allagood, the king of metal, is currently watching the show and has let us know that Nico is in fact greater than Lars. I'm gonna have to seriously go back and listen because I honestly just never noticed. So I'm gonna have to go notice it now. Results in the next episode.
So Dan, tell me about Cynic.
Cynic is an American progressive metal band. That's right, metal with a T. Formed in Miami, Florida in 1987. They play progressive rock, alternative rock, extreme extreme metal. So it's like, imagine if Yes had death vocals, I guess is kind of the only real way to put it. Absolutely 100% one of my favorite bands in this weird genre that they've somewhat created over time. And, the story of Cynic isn't necessarily that interesting in the sense that, it's not like they had a whole bunch of upheaval or anything. They put out a record in 1994 called Focus, or I guess 1993 rather. I don't remember exactly the year. I probably should know that sort of information. Focus.
It was recorded 93, released 94, and there's a bunch of drama in the middle.
Right, and then they basically just disappeared after that. There was just the one Cynic album. And I think part of the reason for that was that this is when death metal was kind of really starting to take off, and you had all these super brutal bands out there doing the brutal thing. So imagine going to a show and it's stacked with all these brutal death metal bands, and then Cynic gets up there and there's a dude singing through a vocoder and the keyboard is just growling sometimes, but all the music is all the songs are just all about enlightenment.
Yeah,
and,
as in saying the bass player's playing a Chapman stick half the time.
Yeah, it's just a very it had to have been jarring for people back then, I mean 93, 94, you're there with you're there with just the expectation that you're going to get your face shredded off, and you really don't get that with Cynic. And I can understand that as a music fan back then, I probably would have been what the hell are these guys doing? Because I would have lacked the mental capacity to understand what they were doing. And so I think this is a band that if I had a modern comparison for it, it would be like going to a deathcore show and the contortionist sits down and plays Language.
Yeah, acoustically.
Yeah, it's one of those what are you guys doing? And so, Geoff, it sounds like you actually know a little bit more than I do about the drama. Let's jump into this first record.
Focus, 1993.
Yeah, this is a landmark discovery for me personally, and for a lot of people. I mean, shit, you got Textures and Veil Maya that felt the same way, so much so that they actually named their bands off tracks on this album. I mean, this is, if you're into progressive metal, could you say others have done it better? Yes, but those who have done it better worship at the altar of Cynic. I mean, this is what really influenced an entire genre. I mean, it's unbelievable how ahead of its time it was, I guess is the best way I would put it. It is it's mind-blowing. You go back and you listen to it. I mean, it's definitely rawer sounding than what you would get from progressive metal now. But if somebody went in and cleaned a few things up, this would sound like it came out 2 years ago. I mean, that's what makes this so fucking cool to me, is that it's damn near timeless. We don't always get the opportunity to have such a unique experience where you have literally they were essentially one and done for a couple decades, and it was like, we're Cynic. There was a lot of drama between Paul and Sean Reinert, and there was just a lot of stuff that went on. The other thing that I think that's super cool, and whenever they came back and reformed, just about the band in general, was, they were probably the two most prominent individuals in metal that came out that is openly gay. And the fact that we as a community in metal, everybody kind of gives us the meathead stigma, and we're not. And I think that's probably that's also a super, super, super important thing that I think needs to be mentioned, is they showed how open and awesome metalheads are. The fact that, pretty much across the board, everybody approved of, who they are and allowed them to be who they were. And they were allowed to be part of the community. And it didn't necessarily start that way because, like Dan had said, they started in that whole Florida death metal scene, and they're not that at all. The one thing that they had going for them and why they got noticed is because they played with Death. They played with Chuck, who is the god of death metal. And there's so much nuance that you don't realize how much influence these guys had when it was all said and done. I actually started playing a fretless bass because of this band when I was a teenager. I mean, that's pretty fucking cool. Back then though, I was the weirdo, but nowadays, everybody looks back and oh, Cynic, they're special. And it isn't necessarily the case, in 94 when this came out, but hey, who cares? We love it now. We just wish everybody from Cynic was still with us. Kind of like how we feel the same way with Death.
I don't know which point to tackle first, so I'm going to go with the release of this record. Definitely ahead of its time. I look back at progressive metal, and you can even look forward at the time this was recorded. They were pulling from decades prior and decades to come. I've heard all of these tricks done by almost every progressive band. There's a lot of Dream Theater in this. Not to say that Dream Theater was a major influence, but that style of clean, heavy metal guitar mixed with progressive music. When I listen to the newest Liquid Tension Experiment, it reminds me of this. And I haven't listened to that much Cynic, but I'm a huge fan of jazz and a huge fan of heavy metal. So when you put those two styles together in a way that makes sense, and you get interesting progressive metal, that is a home run for me. I'm jealous of you, Geoff. I don't say it all the time, but you were around when this came out. You were aware of it more than I could have been at the time. Props to you, man. Yeah. This is a fucking great record.
Yeah, you were right. I feel very fortunate that I was around in high school when this came out. This was something that just, shook the pillars of foundation for me. I mean, it's one of the things that really got me into metal. I mean, to be honest with you, because this, I think I've if there's any old listeners on the show, I mean, I had my roots in classical music, and I played a lot of classical music. I played violin, violoncello, and so this was
at the same time.
I wish.
3 bows and duct tape. It's possible.
Yeah, I was gonna say It wasn't quite that amazing. I'm not one of the guys that are in the band. Otherwise, they probably could do something like that. But no, it's pretty fucking crazy whenever you think about like members of the band, and you have like like Sean Reinert, and he like influenced like Richard Christie, Gene Hoglan, Dick Verburen. I mean, we're talking about like drumming gods. I mean, like how amazing is it that when you go back and you look. Like your favorite band, this is one of their favorite bands. It's one of those kind of scenarios. And we kind of use that cliche a lot, but we legit mean it this time. I mean, there are so many interviews out there of people just gushing over this album, as it should be. I mean, it is...
on some of ours, it's that way. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just one of those things you just can't... it's almost... You don't have the ability to quantify it because it is just that unique, and it's kind of like... it really was a diamond in the rough. I mean, because it was definitely not... They had the chops to play death metal. There's death metal elements, but that is absolutely not what they are. That was just their ability to get the foot in the door, is the fact that they could play it. That's not who they were, like a lot of the other bands in Florida at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have been into this if I had never heard Death's Human, right? Because I had a certain kind of idea of what I thought death metal was supposed to be. And once I heard Human, it just blew the doors off of that. And so obviously, somebody's going to be all like, okay, well, if you heard Death's Human, you should check out Focus by Cynic. And this just blew me away because like it was very spacey. I mean, I know you guys all know how much I love anything having to do with space. And I'm not saying this is like a space metal album or anything like that. We'll get to that when we talk about Cave In inevitably. But it was just very otherworldly. It hits me very much the same way that like I said before, Language like by the Contortionist. I feel like this is like the dad of you know what I mean of albums like that.
No, it absolutely is.
You wouldn't have albums like Language if you didn't have Focus. And the vocoded vocals are probably my favorite part. I could even live without the death metal kind of elements. I almost feel like those are just in there just to be in there. I'm not criticizing the record. I think that all the vocals on display are great, but the sort of like vocoder vocals and stuff that creates a sound that literally nobody else makes in this style of music. And for a record that's considered a death metal classic, it's maybe only like 20% death metal at all.
Yeah, it's more progressive and technical than it is death.
That's what I'm hearing.
By leaps and bounds.
Yeah, and lyrics that are about like personal enlightenment and philosophy and
there's no talking about coming blood or anything like that with these guys.
I mean, that's fun though.
Yeah, it is fun. Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying, and I definitely I love that kind of stuff too. But this was it was groundbreaking, and it's everybody kind of points a finger at Chuck when it comes to death metal, but like you said on Human, there was a marked contrast between Human and what came after as what was before with Death.
Oh yeah,
and I think that Sean and Paul were a huge influence, and not the Sean and Paul from that's. I keep thinking of like Sean Lennon and Paul McCartney.
Sean Lennon?
Yeah, that's Sean Lennon's son. I always, whenever I hear my that or Sean Paul,
Fair enough. All right. Anyway,
sorry.
Let's go ahead and jump off that track. I mean, obviously, it's one of the greatest records of all time in metal, and if you haven't checked it out yet, you need to pause the podcast. Go on. I think you can only watch it on YouTube right now. But if you search for Cynic Focus, you'll find it. Listen to that record to really get an idea of what we're talking about. We could talk about it for 5 hours and not really be able to fully explain it. But it is an absolutely unique experience.
Would you say it's a color situation where it's that good, it needs to be listened to over and over to be appreciated?
I agree, yeah.
I think you can appreciate it at first go around, but it is like Colors in the fact that there's so much nuance and layers, especially for something that came out that early, that there's things that you can miss the first go around. And I think that's one of the more important parts of great music for me personally, whenever I'm listening to it and I catch something that I missed the first go around. I feel the same way about like movies and TV shows, especially movies and music. But, whenever you're like, oh, shit, I didn't see that in the background before, it's paying homage to something else, or there's so much going on, you didn't catch it. That's kind of what it is for me. It's like we've already said, I mean, it's just groundbreaking. It's amazing, and absolutely do yourself a favor and listen to it if you haven't listened to it before. It's definitely not going to be for the meatheads of the audience. That's just.
I mean, I like it. I'm a meathead.
Yeah, but you've gotten you've gotten some influence as time has gone on. So
That's
it's not
fair.
But yeah, maybe that's why the meathead should listen to it, is because it will expand the horizons, because this one is just amazing.
So Geoff, I want you to explain to me why the fuck this album just sat here from 1993 and the band was inactive until 2008. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, just political drama, starting your own business, becoming a college professor. I mean, there's a whole litany of reasons. I think the more interesting thing was between Human and actually creating Focus, there was a lot of production drama. That was probably the biggest part of drama. They just decided, they just went their separate ways. I mean, that's just how shit goes sometimes. But yeah, like I don't know what's the best way to explain it, but I don't know. It's the best way to look at it is that it was like almost like a one-hit wonder. And then they kind of got back for a reunion tour because people realized how much they loved it. That's kind of how I look at it. But yeah, there was just people have disagreements, go their own ways. And then they also started another band after the fact too. So that happens to play a very big part of it as well. And I can't, what the hell is the name of it? I can't, Aeon's shit. I'm going to cheat.
Cheater.
Yep. Aeon Spoke. That was it.
Bravo.
So that was their, essentially they made a rock band. I mean, they just kind of went the complete opposite direction. So
Was it still using a vocoder?
no. And there was also another band, which I have not checked out that I need to, which is Gordian Knot. And that's with Sean Malone. That's a bassist. And also a guy who plays the Chapman stick. And he's the one that became the professor and just became like the god of bass for the longest time within the community, because nobody could do it better. I mean, considering how amazing he was always on pitch on a fretless bass. I mean, like trying to keep your tone good, that's so hard. And he did it like it was nothing. And most people don't have that opportunity. And he proved that he could. That was the other thing that was crazy, because he got called out a bunch of times. Like, oh yeah, no, you can't really do that. And he's like, watch me. And like people like legitimately recorded the dude. Of course, this is before YouTube, but I mean, it made the rounds, and you can find it on YouTube now. But yeah, the guy was just a freak of nature when it came to being able to play what he played, and he just could do it better than anybody else at that time. The only person that I two my favorite bassists we've talked about now, because my other one is Ryan Martini. Even though, speaking of, Mudbang got back together, but yeah. But they both have jazz roots, and I'm not necessarily a big jazz guy, but I love jazz bass, because they got some crazy bass lines, and being able to translate that over is super cool.
We missed you on the Candiria episode, Geoff. Jazz influenced death metal doesn't exist. It can't hurt you. Oh yeah, Candiria.
2008, Traced in Air.
Oh, okay. Talk about pick up where you left off. I was actually really okay. Number one, I wasn't surprised at how different this sounds from Focus, but was also not surprised at how similar it was.
Dare I say excited?
Yeah, like 2008. Obviously, this was a new release by Cynic I was picking up, so like it was gonna hit me a certain way, and I don't think I was ready for it. And I think my understanding is it's so similar because a lot of these songs had already been written for the inevitable follow-up to Focus that never really materialized.
Yeah, I mean, it had been well over a decade in the moving.
15 years.
Yeah, because I know that there was a big push, and because there was a lot of hoopla, and I can't remember what year it was. It doesn't matter. But anyway, there was a lot of news back in the day about and it was going to be coming out, and then finally 2008 hit, and then it was like, okay, we're going to start leaking a little bit of this shit for you guys, and that's when you knew, like, oh, this is legit. They're actually getting back together. This is really going to happen, and super stoked. I would not go as far to say that I liked it as much as I thought I would.
Oh, I was going to say, did you not like this album, Geoff?
No, it's not that. It's just that, you got to understand, Focus was such a landmark. And then whenever 15 years later, I mean, shit, that's, that means your kid has, got his permit that has never even heard of this band. I mean, and now they're driving.
Well, that's your fault.
So, I mean, that's a long fucking time. Yeah. I only say that because I have a 15-year-old that just got his permit. It's my baby. He's my last kid. So it's kind of weird. It's kind of the same thing with this. It's just like, wow, this is completely, like Dan said, it's completely different, but still kind of sounds the same. You can tell that they've been influenced by the people they influenced on this album, I would say, if that makes sense.
It's much more modern sounding.
Yes.
Obviously, it's much more modern sounding. And the dynamics are a lot greater on this than what you'd had on Focus. Whereas I think Focus was just mixed and mastered as a death metal record. And so I think things don't necessarily shine. There's not as much of a dynamic shift in the songs on that record. But we didn't care because it sounds like a 90s record, right? So like that doesn't really matter. So to hear the idea fully realized here, I think this record's absolutely a masterpiece. I don't think it's as good as Focus. But at the same time, if you erase all of the history and all of the amount of caring about Focus that you're supposed to have, you know what I'm talking about? Like, you go into a bar and you're wearing a Metallica t-shirt and some old guy's like, it never got any better than Pink Floyd.
That definitely happened back in the day.
Oh yeah, it happened all the time. And there's a lot of people that will just tell you that some band is classic. I mean, look at the Beatles. Everybody wants you to appreciate the Beatles. And really, Focus by Cynic was one of those records that people did that too as well and said, hey, it never got better than this record. This record's amazing, And it's great that they're fans of the record. And that record is actually great and does deserve a little bit of, it deserves your attention. But to turn around and say a record like Traced in Air is shit, which I don't think any of us are doing. But there were people that were like, yeah, it's not the same. Well, of course it's not the same. It came out 15 years later. You can't expect it to just be Focus Part 2.
This comes out 1 year after Colors, which was right around the time Dream Theater had the Progressive Nation tour. So for fans of this genre who listen to Dream Theater, Opeth, Between the Buried and Me, those progressive metal bands, or those bands that are conventionally referred to as progressive metal, this is exactly what you wanted, even if you didn't know it. One of my favorite things about that tour, Dan and I got to see 3 for the first time. And as weird and different as it was, it fit right in. There's something to be said for a band that challenges your conventional metal wisdom, because it's still heavy, no matter how quiet it might be. That's one of my favorite things about Cynic, and they do it again on this record. For as heavy as it is and intense and as loud as it is, it has that Opeth quality of the vocals are backed off a little bit because you're supposed to be listening to the whole band, not just the volume of the guitars, the tone, the double bass. You're supposed to be paying attention to the music. So you have a perfect, near perfect follow-up to the previous record. Came out 15 years later. They wrote some or all of this before. So what's the problem? It fits right in with what was popular at the time for progressive metalheads.
I think the only problem with it that it could exist, and this is purely Dan, the music critic, talking, and not Dan, the fan of Cynic, talking. The only thing that really takes away from it is that metal had finally caught up. It took 15 years. It took a long time.
But we got there.
But this is a point where we had started hearing very similar things that probably were influenced by Cynic, do a very similar sort of thing. So for me, it wasn't exactly the landmark, totally destroy my mind album that I thought it was going to be. It was just another excellent progressive metal album to go with my collection. And you get the notoriety being like, oh, fuck yeah, it's Cynic. You know what I mean? You get to throw that name out there again. And I think it's a killer release, and I think it's as good as it reasonably could have been expected to be.
Yeah, the one thing that I will say that I do like more on this, and maybe I might be a little bit contrary to what other people think, probably Dan, because he loved the vocoder so much. I love the vocals on this. I love the layering. I love the use of the blended highs and falsettos of Paul's voice with the female vocals. It fit really, really well for me. It's easy to sing if you know how to use your head and your falsetto voice. It's actually really easy to just kind of chill out and sing it, and you don't have to sing it loud because he's not singing loud whenever he's, I guarantee you, whenever he was in the studio singing this, he was not belting it. He was probably up eating the mic because he had to be so close to it to create the sound that he is, because it's pianissimo. I mean, it's very, very, very quiet.
I approve.
Yeah, I do too. And it's
by the way, I have a copy of that on CD for you.
Of what?
The third Virgin Black album.
Oh, okay.
They sent it to us.
Okay.
After hearing the episode. So yeah, next time I see you, you got a copy.
Yeah, yeah. So that means the next time we go to Dan's house, because he's never leaving his house again.
And I'm never gonna let them in. I'd become a total shut-in. Speaking of being a total shut-in, I think that this was great, and I admit, yeah, of course, I love the vocoder so much. There is an electronic effect on this voice through parts of this.
Yes,
it's just a lot more subtle than it was before. But I didn't really mind that as much. I didn't know if like they were really gonna be able to pull off that cheesy vocoder sound like now.
Yeah,
know,
and I think part of the reason why it's more tame is because they on top of using a little bit of that vocoder kind of feel to his voice, I mean, they layer multiple vocal tracks as well, and that's the reason.
Yeah, so it creates a very similar feeling.
Yeah, it gives you a feeling of expanse in like almost like an echo feel, like it's cavernous, and I actually really, really dig that. It feels
or
like
spacey.
Yeah, it's like it's very ambient. So you kind of feel like it's all around you. You get a good pair of headphones or some stereo speakers that have some awesome sound staging, and this is a fantastic listen. I think this is like if I'm going to bed, because I like to listen to music before I go to bed, like fall asleep to it. This is there for me. Whereas Trace and Error, I'm probably going to do that first. So out of their, like, I guess it's 4 albums now. I don't know. I only look at 3, but anyway.
Well, it's not quite 4.
Yeah.
Everybody mark this on your calendar. Okay. It's a very special day. We're going to take a second out to talk about the 2011 EP Carbon-Based Anatomy. Did you guys listen to this one?
Nope, because I messaged you and I said, we're not going to be listening to the EPs this time around, right? And you said, yep. So
yeah, it's just so that I could upstage you.
Yeah, I know, because I did that on the 9 Inch Nails episode, and now you get to turn around and it's fair play. Fair play.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Carbon-Based Anatomy is obviously not a required listen. It's actually kind of one of those releases where I appreciated hearing new songs, but it turns out the reason I'm saying these are notable is because one of the songs, the actual song "Carbon-Based Anatomy," is a rediscovered version of an Aeon song, or Aeon Spoke.
Yeah,
rather.
Homo sapien.
And I thought that was really cool. I liked hearing kind of a different version of that, and it's funny because like the different version that I heard was actually Homo sapien, because I never listened to Aeon Spoke before.
Gotcha.
So I'd heard the Cynic version of it first, and I thought that was really cool. I'm not as big of a fan of the fact that like 3 of the songs are just instrumental, kind of like more ambient songs. And I wanted to talk about the EP because this is 100% one of the things that I don't like about EPs is this was really good. It was a small sampling, and all it did was make me want more. And I didn't get more for 3 more years.
I gotcha. I understand. Yeah, it was.
I didn't hate it. It's a Cynic record. I liked it, but yeah.
Yeah, because it's rather ambient. Since we talked about that this EP is 100% ambient.
It almost takes the line. It almost takes the definition. I'm sorry. It almost takes the abbreviation literally. Extended play. This is an extension of the record that you've previously heard or the one that you're about to hear. So it doesn't give you 100% what you're looking for, but keeps the idea fresh. And I think that's important when your next record is 2014's Kindly Bent to Free Us.
Now this one, shockingly, I was waiting for my kid to get back from a band competition, and the bus was late, and my wife was with me, and she liked it. She liked this album. I was like, holy fucking shit.
How could she not?
Because she likes pop music. So she's like, wow, this is really good. How come all your stuff doesn't sound like this? And there's no screaming, and It's pretty, and they're really talented musicians. And I'm like, yeah, it's all great, minus the fact that there's no screaming.
You're like, and if you listen really closely, you can hear Dan somewhere out in the world crying out in pain that there's no screaming.
But I'll tell you what, though, there was it's Kindly Bent to Free Us, the eponymous track. It's one of my favorite songs of theirs. And I love it. So, and even my wife said that's probably the best song that she's heard of every song that I've ever done while I've tortured her listening to discographies. And she's like, well, if everything sounded this good, I would have let you listen to. No, I'm kidding. It definitely was not that. That's why I was not gone for so long. It was because of work, not because of my wife. I promise. I'm just teasing.
Do I need to tell you to get out of my house again, Geoff?
Hey, why do you think I'm here? I got kicked out of my own.
Fair enough. Let me bring the box back in. I know Josh has been waiting for it.
Oh, yeah, I just got out of his fucking trunk, man.
Corner of the studio? What do you guys have in that box in the corner of the studio?
Don't worry about it.
You wouldn't believe me. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. And it's just Geoff tied up in the box. Yeah.
I've seen this movie before. He must have failed his audition. Oh shit.
So I'm just gonna say it. I'm gonna get it out of the way. This is my least favorite Cynic album.
That's not a shock.
It's not. I mean, it's just a little bit too hippie free love for me.
That's a straight up like light prog rock album.
It really is. It really is, and it bugs me. It bugs me that it says that it's Cynic. But like, what else could you call it though? You know what I mean? Like with these guys playing this type of music. It's just that we've gone so far off the beaten path from where we started with Focus at this point that I'm starting to just kind of lose my sense of why I liked that record. I liked the combination of extreme metal and like this sort of stuff. But I don't know. It just really didn't really grab me except for in a couple of places. And I think that's fine, though. I think this is like kind of in a way the ultimate realization of what they've kind of always been going for.
Yeah. And then actually in a lot of interviews, Paul has said that if, they were prolific and together throughout all the years, this is what you would have gotten the bulk of.
Yeah.
So they, this is ultimately the sound that they are. This is originally who they are. So everything else has kind of been like a bit of a front. And I think this is them, bearing their soul for everybody to see. And I like it. We've kind of given, since we've talked a fair amount about the Contortionists on here, is their change in direction as well. They've said that they would, as time goes on, it was always the plan to go more prog rock. And I think that if we would have continued on, if they're unfortunately both Sean's hadn't passed, you would have gotten a lot of this.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, there was another falling out between Paul and Sean Reinhardt. And Sean Reinhardt left the band in 2015. And there was talks of actually getting another get together. And unfortunately, he passed away. And then not too long after that, Sean Malone also passed. And that's just, for me, gut-wrenching. It's hard to talk about sometimes because, especially with Sean Malone, because he committed suicide, and that's a really tough subject for me. Always has been. I've had a couple of people, some of the most influential people in my life that have, lost their battle with depression and mental health, and that's always tough to hear, and it sucks. But thankfully, we do have quite the dynasty that they've left us. It's still my favorite type of music is progressive / technical metal / rock. It kind of, mainly because it's kind of like a smorgasbord. There's a little bit of something for everybody. And I really do appreciate that, we've had the privilege to listen to what they've had to provide us.
Is that your final thought on Cynic, Geoff?
I think so. It pretty much is.
I don't have a lot to say about this record, but it isn't as influential as the previous two for me. I think it exists for the reason you just said. It's the extra pieces of the puzzle. Fans of metal, fans of progressive music can listen to this band and should be. Dream Theater got a lot of credit back in the day for popularizing progressive metal, but I think the musicians were listening to Cynic. for that reason, I think everyone should be listening to Cynic. You're going to hear something in this music that has been done by other bands, and they probably took it from Cynic. So listen to Cynic. It's some of the most interesting progressive metal because it doesn't jam too much. It doesn't try to be brutal when it doesn't need to be. It's the perfect balance of the next 45 minutes of your life. And that's exactly what you need. You should be listening to this band. Dan, what about you?
I think that Cynic was the original band's band. You know, they were kind of one of those bands that really great for what they did, but I think sometimes their greatness was only recognized by other musicians, more so than the metal fan base at large. And I think they're a band that took a long time to cook in the collective consciousness of progressive music fans. But I think once it hits so good. It hits so well. And they're a band that if you're into modern bands, you know, like The Contortionist, you really need to go back and check out Cynic because you're going to see the roots of where all this came from. This idea of like, hey, you know, heavy music doesn't have to make me feel bad. It can actually be a really positive experience.
And what's your album of the week?
My album of the week. Well, I mean, I wasn't going to say this, but because it was different this morning, but now it's definitely.
Did you steal? Are you going to steal my thunder?
Oh, I'm going to steal your thunder hard.
Shit. I knew you would once I showed it to you.
He asked me first. Okay. And if you can't already tell by my LED lights, it's Eternal Blue by Spiritbox. Check it out. It's incredible. And my kid was actually on the microphone trying to sing along earlier today when we were watching some videos.
Yeah, I tell you what, Courtney LaPlante is where it's at. Your daughter picked a very good person to emulate.
Geoff, what about you? Or do I need to copy and paste Dan's answer?
You're going to have to copy and paste Dan's answer because Spiritbox, Eternal Blue is the shit. And I'm going to give one song that you absolutely have to check out because it was heavy as fuck and I was not prepared for it to happen. And that is Silk and the Strings. Holy shit. Yeah. Holy shit. Man, did I love it. I loved the whole thing. And that was actually another one that I tortured my wife with. And she said, as long as she's not screaming, I really like this music.
Blah.
Yeah, I know. She's getting there. That's the thing, though, Dan.
Screaming's part of it, man.
Yeah, I know. But you remember 5 years ago, not even an option. The fact that we're slowly converting her is pretty awesome to me.
I guess. Screaming.
We'll get the screaming part. It'll get there.
For me, it's both records, Deliverance and Damnation by Opeth.
Nice.
The first time Dan gave me progressive metal and said, or progressive death metal, whatever you want to call it, and it was truly the A-side, B-side. It was the pretty stuff and the not pretty stuff. It all works together. It's one experience for me, so you should be listening to that record.
And we got some great picks this week. Now, Joe, go listen to some Spiritbox, so that can be your album of the week next week.
For you, Geoff, I will listen to Spiritbox.
All right.
Take us out, DFT.
If you guys like this podcast and you would like to give us any type of feedback on if you guys are liking the episodes, if you're not liking the episodes, I'm sure I don't have to tell you to let us know if you don't like the episodes. But there's a lot of different ways you can reach out to us. You can hit us up on Facebook at facebook.com/discography discussion. You can send us a tweet at Discuss Metal. You can Instagram us, whatever the word is for Instagramming people. Also at Discuss Metal. And you can send us an email at danandjoeshow@gmail.com. And if you guys want to get more involved in talking to us directly about your feelings about albums, make sure to join us on the Discord server where we will be hanging out. Drop a question, hang out with all the other cool people there. There'll be a link in the show notes that'll take you right there. And if you want a Discography Discussion t-shirt with the classic logo, now is the time to head to our Teespring store where we have a variety of different items for you to pick up that have the classic logo on them because that logo is going away. And I think you've got probably maybe 2 more weeks of it being on there. So make sure to check that out. There'll be a link in the show notes to that as well.
And on that note, this has been episode 240 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Visit DiscussMetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/DiscussMetal. We have some sweet perks.
Give me your money, you motherfucker.
$1 a month gets you into that exclusive album review feed.
Yeehaw!